All right, so let's keep talking about conservation biology here. Last lecture, we talked about the basic idea of the conservation biology field or subdiscipline, however we want to describe it. And then we were discussing endemic species and this idea of hotspots. So again, hotspots are areas where there's a large number of endemic species, a lot of biodiversity there. So definitely areas to prioritize when we discuss conservation. We can't save everything. That's just the sad reality we have to accept. Can't save it all. Focus on the most important areas. So what teams of biologists, ecologists, etc., have done is they've gone around the world and they've tried to identify the most important biodiverse areas. We've come up with 25 hotspots. These hotspots, these 25 locations alone contain about half of all terrestrial species, diversity in the world. So if you're going to save something, focus on these 25 spots. And yeah, that goes back to our map. And you go, okay, do we have any of this in the US? Well, take a look at down here. Let me zoom in on this map a little bit more to give you guys a better feel for. All right, so Florida, definitely. When you start looking at Florida, you got down here the entire Caribbean. We do have California, this whole area over here. So yes, the U.S. has some areas that are of significant concern, but so does the rest of the world. So again, we focus on this and say, okay, what can I do? What do we focus on? And why are these areas not preserved? Well, the challenge is hotspots often have very little what we call direct value. People don't see these things as having any value, so they're considered worthless. All right, if there's no value to that swamp and I can drain it and develop it and be a land developer and a real estate developer and make money and benefit the economy and give people jobs, yeah, that's totally worth it. You know, the mangroves on the other side, the other picture. Sure, who cares about those? If you've never been in one, mangroves are not pleasant environments when you're walking around in them. They're humid, they're hot, they're full of insects, they're smelly because of the decomposition. So superficially, people are like, ugh, these areas suck. What can I do with this? So we don't see the value. We don't attach a direct value. And that's often what a lot of human society focuses on, is direct value. Can I make money from these things? So it's easy to say, yeah, I'll buy that swamp because it's cheap, because there's no direct value. And then I'm going to drain it and I'm going to convert it. And I'll make a lot of money benefiting society and get the economy rolling and people make money. I'll do the same thing with the mangroves. I'll cut them down. I'll build this beautiful resort. I'll get rid of all those nasty tangled prop roots and I'll turn it into a shrimp farm. Everybody likes shrimp. Got all sorts of shrimp. Barbecue, grilled, deep fried. Anyway, we often focus on the dollar value versus what we'll discuss in a little bit called indirect values. So this is what causes hotspots to get destroyed, is we don't see a value in them. We don't have the knowledge or the exposure to recognize the value of that biodiversity. So when we look at these hotspots, I said the concern is big issues with extinction rates. The main reason why things go extinct in hotspots: habitat destruction. Let's make that bold. All right, we're cutting them down. Now, why is it being destroyed? We clear the land for agriculture, housing, economic development, I'm just going to say et ceteras. That's why we're destroying them. It's a financial thing. And I'm not against people making money, but we really need to understand what we're losing. $1 today is great, but did you sacrifice $10 tomorrow to get your $1 today? Sometimes that is necessary, but what's the bigger picture? And how long can you keep doing that? How long can you keep sacrificing the future for today's immediate requirements? So, kind of bigger perspective, more than 70% of the original area, physical footprint, acreage of the hotspots has pretty much disappeared. So they've been reduced by about 70% in each of those areas. In 14 of the areas, 14 hotspots, only about 15% of the original habitat is still there. Madagascar has lost over 90% of its forests. The Atlantic coast in Brazil, 95% of the forest is gone. It's a massive, massive loss of diversity. So those are the things we have to figure out. How do we change people's perceptions, perspectives, mindset, culture? Can we find other ways to benefit the economy and help people financially without the destruction of the biodiversity that is there? So what we do is we have to figure out the value of it. And that's just human nature. We focus on value of things. What is it worth? What does it cost? What's the gain? We often look at what's called direct economic value. Money. What can I get from this to benefit or assist in human survival? So if you have a direct value, you're more likely to be preserved. So those bolts and nuts that hold your tire on, you're probably going to want to keep those. But the antenna, yeah, you could probably sacrifice that. So again, it's figuring out the value and showing people the value to convince them to help preserve these hotspots. So one big value, direct economic value of a resource, of biodiversity. Food, medicine, clothing, what we call biomass. Can we use it for energy production? Building materials. And again, let's just put an etc. because this is a big long list. What about genetic variation? That's an important thing to consider. Genetic variation. The domesticated crops and animals, the agricultural industry, those things have very limited genetic diversity. The wild strains that we originally used to produce our domesticated crops have genetic variation in them. If we lose those things, we are in a world of hurt if we need to look for new sources of genetic variation, disease resistance, fungal resistance, pathogenic resistance. Those things are found in nature. We don't have them in our domesticated crops unless we find a way to bring that gene from nature into the domesticated crops and then spread it through the domesticated crop with biotechnology and genetic engineering. But the source of the genetic variation comes from nature. That's what we have to focus on. Those of you heading towards pharmaceutical pursuits, medicine, you need biodiversity. It's estimated over 40% of 40% of prescription drugs and non-prescription These things have active ingredients that come from nature. They're extracted from plants. Where did they originally derive? Rainforest, deciduous forest, other environments. All right. Oops. So for those of you who have time on your hands, I think it's, check out a movie called Medicine Man. It's with Sean Connery. It's old. I can't even remember. It was old when I saw it many years ago. I'm trying to guess if this came out in the 80s or maybe early 90s. Probably can get it on Netflix or Prime or something like that. But check it out. This is directly speaking to why biodiversity is important. He finds a cure for cancer in the rainforest, and then it's destroyed. Logging. Come in, cut down the rainforest. He loses a cure. That is reality. The cures for these diseases. Who knows, the COVID pandemic of 2019 and 2020, that cure could be sitting in nature. The cure for the next global pandemic that we will have and the next major disease is sitting in nature. Nature is a balancing act. You have a poison, you have an antidote. And it's amazing. In the rainforest, I've seen this. I've watched this and looked at this and studied this. You have one plant, one tree that will give you a horrible burning rash, and then 20 feet away you have a tree that has the antidote. That is how nature works. We need to recognize that and work with that instead of fighting against it and ignoring it. So we often, again, focus on direct value. Direct value is the financial gain that a species slash, we'll say community, let's go species slash biome, provides humans. So sometimes it's a single species, like, ooh, the Pacific yew, I can derive compounds from that and help cure people. Other times it's an entire ecosystem that we need when we look at direct value. In the medicinal world, this number is a moving target, but we're looking at billions of dollars per year in the pharmaceutical industry is made from medicinal plants. They provide billions of dollars. It's just crazy the amount of money that the pharmaceutical industry makes, different aspects of it make because of medicine. So here's some examples. I don't want you guys to get hung up in the little details here. I'm not going to ask you these little details. This is conversation information. Rosy periwinkle. This plant is used to treat childhood leukemia. Survival rates have gone from 20% to 95% survival rate when children have leukemia because of that single plant, the anti-cancer properties. Taxol comes from the Pacific yew, another cancer-fighting drugs. Sadly, 1 out of 3 of us listening to this lecture will need Taxol. We're going to get cancer as part of our lives. So if we lose the Pacific yew, we lose cancer-fighting drugs. What other cancer-fighting drugs are sitting out there in those ecosystems? So those are huge, huge things to consider. The health of the human society is dependent upon the biodiversity out there in nature. As we keep losing it, we keep losing things that will save our lives. So there's a huge argument to be made. A lot of pharmaceutical companies understand this, and they have actually bought thousands of acres of jungle, of rainforest to use for research. All right, so in our next lecture, we're going to talk about other values of nature.